She didn't kill me with a knife. She killed me with a letter and a bank statement. My name is Daniel Reeves, 47 years old. I once sold used cars off a sidewalk, slept in the back of a pickup truck with my wife during freezing Dallas winters. I used to believe if anyone was meant to walk beside me to the end of life, it was her. That morning I woke up early, picked out a small silver necklace, our 20th wedding anniversary gift. Today was also the 15th birthday of our company, the business we built from scratch. I tucked the necklace into my suit pocket, imagining how I'd hand it to her after my speech tonight. I thought it would be a perfect moment. I had no idea I'd never get the chance. Just minutes before I went on stage, my assistant approached with a puzzled look, handing me a pale cream envelope. My wife's handwriting, delicate, slanted, elegant, on the front. To Daniel, from me. I smiled. I thought she had planned a surprise, maybe something romantic. I opened it gently, tenderly, trustingly. Daniel, I want a divorce. I've sold all the shares in my name. I'm with Ethan now. Don't come looking. I read it 3 times, 3 short lines, no punctuation, no warmth, like 3 clean cuts, bloodless but fatal. I froze. Beyond the curtain, the MC's voice echoed, introducing me to the crowd. Stage lights flared to life. The room was ready to erupt in applause. But I couldn't hear a thing. My ears buzzed, my vision blurred. I pulled out the rest of the envelope's contents. A signed divorce agreement, a transfer of stock ownership, a bank statement showing she had been draining the company's funds piece by piece, including the emergency fund I'd set up for employees in hard times. And Ethan, I'd never heard that name in my life. Whoever he was, he had clearly been part of this for a while. This wasn't sudden, it was strategic. I sat down in the nearest chair. My hand still clutched the paper. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my heart and left nothing in its place. I remembered our first night opening the garage. She grilled hot dogs on a propane tank flame, grinned ear to ear when a skeptical customer came back because you sell cheap, but you're honest. She used to sit wrapped in 3 jackets, shivering, and still hand me the first coffee every morning. 15 years, reduced to 3 sentences. I stood, tore the envelope, shoved it in my inside pocket, then walked onto the stage like a ghost. Thank you all for being here today, but I'm sorry, I can't do this. No one in the crowd understood, but I did. If she thought this would break me, she forgot something. I've fixed cars with bare hands in sub-zero weather. I've sold vehicles without AC in 105-degree heat. I was built for hardship. I don't even remember how I got out of that conference room. All I know is when I stood alone inside the elevator watching my own reflection in the scratched metal door, I didn't recognize the man staring back. My dress shirt was soaked in sweat. My hands were still trembling. The crumpled envelope in my inner jacket pocket pressed against my chest like a burning scar. I had forgotten all about the necklace in my other pocket, the one I had carefully chosen that morning. A gift meant to celebrate our 20 years together. Now it was just a piece of metal no one would receive. I didn't cry, didn't scream, I just stopped hearing the world. Everything went silent except for the sound of my heartbeat, erratic, pounding, echoing like someone hammering from inside my own ribs. I drove without knowing where I was going. No destination, no reason, just movement. Until my car came to a halt in front of an old building, our very first garage. 15 years ago, we had rented it together. Now, it was just a cheap car wash hidden behind a gas station. I stepped out, stood in front of the glass window smeared with dust, staring through the past. We once painted our handprints on that roll-up door, mine on the left, hers on the right. A promise. We'd never walk away from each other. Now the paint was faded, peeling, just faint smudges that looked more like stains than vows. She once told me, if I ever start changing, promise me you'll pull me back. I'm scared I'll forget where we began. I didn't pull, or maybe she never really wanted to be pulled back. A soft gust swept past me. It smelled of old gasoline, of rust, and something that felt like morning, like the scent of something long dead, finally surfacing. I stood there for a long time until my phone buzzed. A bank notification. An unusual transaction had just gone through, taken from one of our joint business accounts, the one that only she and I had access to. I glanced at the name of the recipient, Ethan Blake. I gripped the phone tighter. There was something deeper than betrayal here. This wasn't just a love affair, it was a plan. Ethan Blake. That name kept echoing in my head the entire way home. None of her friends had ever mentioned him. He wasn't listed among our staff, clients, or any of our business affiliates. I checked everything: internal contacts, vendor lists, executive connections. Nothing. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a blueprint. All those recent executive advance withdrawals. The odd financial decisions she made while I was preoccupied expanding our operations. Her shift in mood these past few months. Cold, withdrawn, easily irritable. Back then I thought it was midlife stress, burnout, or just the weight of a long marriage. Now I knew. It was preparation. I sat in my office under the dim gold lamp at the desk where I had built most of my life. What used to be my dream was now my battlefield. I didn't call her, didn't send a message asking why. I already knew I wouldn't get the truth. Instead, I opened my laptop. I began combing through all transactions from the last 3 months, the ones I had handed over to her because I trusted her blindly. And there it was, a series of small, regular wire transfers, each insignificant on its own, just enough to stay under the radar, but together they added up to a staggering amount. Every single transfer led to a shell company registered in another state under the name of a young CEO, Ethan Blake. I stared at the screen. At that moment, I wasn't a betrayed husband anymore. I was a businessman, the same man who once survived the 2008 crash, who'd pulled his company back from the brink of bankruptcy more than once. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I unlocked my phone, scrolled down to a number I had saved years ago, for worst-case scenarios only, a name no one inside my company ever spoke aloud, but everyone in the legal world knew. Attorney X. I called Attorney X at 11:47 p.m. that night. Not the next morning, not after I had time to calm down. I knew one thing: if I waited any longer, she could erase the traces, or he could vanish. I wasn't giving them that window. His real name is Vincent Hale, a man who never appears in the media but is quietly present in the background of every high-stakes financial courtroom in the last decade. They call him the quiet trigger. He doesn't make noise. He doesn't leave blood. But after every case he touches, at least one person loses everything. I worked with Vincent 8 years ago on a brutal shareholder dispute. We never spoke again. But I always kept his number, like a loaded gun in a drawer reserved for the worst day of my life. And that day had finally come. We met at a small bar near the interstate. No music, no distractions. I didn't need alcohol. I needed precision. Vincent arrived exactly on time. Gray suit, weathered leather briefcase, a face carved from stone. He sat down, opened his laptop, and gave me a single nod, like he already knew what this was about. I slid over a folder. Bank statements, internal emails, financial authorizations my wife had signed. All the things I should have seen months ago, if I hadn't been so busy trusting her. Vincent read in silence, page by page. His face remained unreadable, until he reached the name, Ethan Blake. "Do you know him?" he asked. "No," I replied. "Never heard of him, but every transaction leads to him." Vincent made a few notes, then leaned back slightly. "She didn't do this alone. He's the financial funnel. Each transfer is legalized, small enough to avoid alerting auditors. The shell companies in New Mexico, listed CEO, Ethan Blake." He paused. "And this isn't adultery. This is white-collar crime." I leaned forward. My voice was calm but cold. "I'm not here for a clean divorce. I want them dragged into the light. I want them to lose everything." Vincent didn't smile, but I saw it. A faint twitch at the corner of his mouth. The look of a predator who's just caught the scent of blood. "Good," he said. "We start tonight." He immediately made 3 calls to people I assumed were from his private network. One was a former SEC tracker, one a specialist in tracing hidden financial networks, and one a former Justice Department investigator who took down shell corporations for a living. I returned to my office just before 2 a.m. The city was dead quiet, but inside me something had come alive. I wasn't tired, I was focused, like I'd never been before. I opened every email from the last 3 months, messages I'd skimmed because I trusted her, financial reports I'd ignored because I believed she'd handle them. Then I found it. An email she forwarded by mistake. It was meant to go to me, but in the CC line she had accidentally included someone else, Ethan. I stared at the screen. That one slip confirmed everything. I was no longer the betrayed husband. I was the only one left who understood the board. And this time, I wouldn't let them win. The next morning, Vincent sent me 2 folders. One contained legal documents on the shell company registered under Ethan Blake's name in New Mexico. The other was a series of photographs. I opened the second one first. He looked at least 10 years younger than me. Slicked back brown hair, eyes that were sharp, hollow. In the photos, he was sitting across from my wife at a small cafe by the river, 30 miles away from our corporate office. They were facing each other, but their hands were gently intertwined beneath the table, intimate, unashamed. I flipped to the next page. They were walking into a hotel together, Wednesday evening, the same night she told me she was meeting an out-of-state financial partner. I stared at the photo for a long time, no pain, just a cold, rising disgust spreading through my chest like slow poison. Then Vincent called. "We've got visuals, transaction trails, and one more thing." His voice was deeper than usual. An audio recording from a hotel staffer. Ethan left his phone on during a call with a legal advisor. We got a copy. I opened the file. Ethan's voice came through, crisp and unmistakable. "She signed the power of attorney on schedule. After the divorce, everything funnels through the intermediary firm. I'm the listed owner. It's airtight. Daniel won't suspect a thing. He thinks this is just emotional fallout." A pause, then her voice, soft, familiar, still capable of slicing me in half. "Are you sure? What if he finds out?" "Trust me. He'll fold before he even thinks about calling a lawyer." I stopped the recording. I didn't need to hear any more. I went back to the draft of the power of attorney document she had once asked me to glance through before submitting. I hadn't really read it, just skimmed and nodded like a fool. Now, each line read like a knife sliding backward across my ribs. She had inserted a clause allowing the transfer of her post-divorce assets to a temporary third-party custodian. Translation: every dollar she would receive from our settlement would go straight to Ethan's company, disguised as a legal holding agreement. It was theft, dressed in legal language, a hit job in a suit. I printed every contract, highlighted every clause. I organized the entire file into a folder labeled Hawk 0.1, the code name Vincent had assigned to our counterattack strategy. That night, I stayed in my office until almost dawn, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I refused to close my eyes while they burned down the life I built. I used to think betrayal was about love, about broken hearts and teary goodbyes. But this was economic assassination, and I was the target. 3 days later, Vincent called me just before noon. No greetings, no pleasantries. I found out who he is. His real name is Ethan Lowell. I frowned. That last name triggered something distant. Vincent forwarded me an archived article from a financial news site dated back to 2013. The headline came up, bold and unflinching. Lowell Motors declares bankruptcy after last-minute investment pullout, hundreds laid off. I froze. Lowell Motors, a name I hadn't thought about in years. Back then, they were a promising partner, We were negotiating to launch a statewide auto service chain together. The memorandum was signed, expansion plans underway, but I pulled out, not on a whim, out of instinct and numbers. I'd noticed irregularities in their financial reports. Inflated revenue, vague expense entries. I couldn't prove fraud, but something was off. So I quietly withdrew. Never made a statement, but that one move scared off other investors. Within 6 months, the company collapsed. To me, it was just a smart business decision. To them, it was betrayal. The company's founder, Richard Lowell, and in the corporate records, one name stood out, a 19-year-old son, Ethan Lowell. Vincent continued, I traced his academic background and activity over the last decade. Degree in finance, additional studies in law. He never worked in the corporate world directly, but he's always been orbiting companies connected to Richard Lowell's downfall. A chill spread through me. It all lined up. This wasn't random. This wasn't just lust. It was revenge. Slow, calculated, and deeply personal. I suddenly saw everything in reverse. The way she changed over the past year, her distance, her sudden obsession with protecting assets. Her shift from partner to stranger. Had she fallen in love with him, or had she simply become a piece on his board? And even more unsettling, how long had she known? Vincent's voice came back, low and steady. Whether she's been manipulated or complicit from the start, she's crossed the line. There's no walking this back. I didn't respond. I just stared at the latest photo of Ethan. The smirk on his face, the kind that says, I never forgot. The courtroom was bright under fluorescent lights, but everything inside me was dark. I sat still, silent, unblinking, my hands resting on the cold wooden table, not out of fear, but because I knew, in just a few minutes, the cracks would start to show. Across the room she entered, not with the posture of a wife, but like a negotiator. She wore a cream blazer, her hair neatly tied back, her gaze steady and unreadable. When she glanced at me, it was brief, like acknowledging a former business partner, nothing more. Beside her sat Ethan, the man who had slithered into my life wearing a charming disguise. He adjusted his cuffs with ease, leaned in, whispered something to her. She smiled, faint, controlled, but I knew that smile. It was laced with contempt. They thought they had already won, that today was merely the formality, a division of assets to wrap up a game they believed they'd already finished clean. The judge entered. We all stood. I heard the scrape of chairs, like the sound of ritual before an execution. Their attorney spoke first, a man with a polished suit and a voice as smooth as glass, every word carefully chosen, as if trying to paint a robbery as a civilized farewell. My client seeks nothing more than fairness, a share reflective of her devotion over 15 years. Vincent, sitting beside me, didn't move. He was still, solid, like a blade held in reserve for the final blow. I glanced at her one more time, and for a split second, barely noticeable, she clenched her fist. A blink, a pause. Was it nerves or instinct? Then it was our turn. Vincent rose slowly, no theatrics, no raised voice. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder, heavy, sharp-edged, dense like a verdict. Your Honor, Vincent began calmly, this is not a divorce case. It is a deliberate, calculated act of deception, a financial fraud disguised as the dissolution of a marriage. The room fell silent, and I knew from that very second on, they were no longer in control of this courtroom. Vincent rose. He didn't speak right away. He looked straight at the judge, then placed a thick folder on the bench. Slow, steady, like sealing a verdict before the execution. Your Honor, he began, his voice low and precise, like steel being drawn from a sheath. We submit Exhibit A, a complete set of corporate bank records from the past 3 months, outlining systematic financial transfers made by the defendant to an offshore company named Everlane Advisory, registered in New Mexico. He opened the file. The sound of paper turning echoed sharply in the dead quiet courtroom. The registered director of Everlane is Ethan Lowell, also known here as Ethan Blake. She flinched. It was brief, but I saw it. Her jaw clenched. Her hand tightened around the edge of the table, not because of the money, but because the name Lowell had just been said out loud, a past she never thought would resurface in this courtroom. Vincent didn't stop. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a USB, and plugged it into his laptop. We submit Exhibit B, an audio recording of a conversation between the defendant and Mr. Lowell, recorded by a hotel staff member during one of their overnight stays. Ethan's voice filled the room. She signed. After the divorce, everything goes through Everlane. I'm the listed owner. It's clean. They'll never trace it. Daniel won't suspect a thing. He thinks this is about love. Then her voice, soft, hesitant. Are you sure? What if we get caught? We won't. He'll be too broken to fight. I looked away from the screen and stared at her instead. The woman who once sat beside me on a cold garage floor, who used to bring me coffee in the early mornings, hands trembling from winter frost. Now she sat silent, back straight, but her fingers were clasped together tightly, as if trying to hold on to something slipping through. Vincent went on. Exhibit C. The forwarded email she accidentally sent to the wrong address, revealing Ethan as the recipient of the asset reallocation. Exhibit D. A hidden clause in the power of attorney authorizing full asset transfers to a third party in the event of post-divorce financial complications. The silence was heavy now. The judge nodded. Their attorney said nothing. Couldn't. Ethan turned to her. For the first time since the session began, his face wasn't confused. It was furious, not because they'd lost, but because she'd left too many traces. She didn't look back. She clenched her jaw, breathing through her nose like someone who finally realized the storm had come from inside. The game was over, and the man they thought had collapsed was the one who had laid the trap. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel victory. I felt hollow. As if all the love, betrayal, memories, pain, and tears of 20 years had been torn open in one motion, and now all that remained was stillness. Vincent returned to his seat. He placed a firm hand on my shoulder, a quiet nod. I sat there, and in that moment I knew I was no longer the betrayed. I was the survivor. 20 days after the first hearing, the court delivered its final verdict. There were no more objections. No more performances, only the truth, cold, clear, and undeniable. The courtroom was more crowded than usual. Cameras weren't allowed, but word had already leaked. A high-profile divorce case involving multi-million-dollar corporate shares, layered with allegations of fraud, asset laundering, and a shell company set up to siphon wealth behind a legal facade. She and Ethan sat with one seat between them. No glances, no whispers. Like two strangers bound together by a crime they no longer had the strength to share. I sat in the front row beside Vincent. In front of me, silence, and the weight of the past. The judge entered. The gavel struck once, and then his voice, steady and deliberate, cut through the still air like a surgical blade. After a thorough review of the evidence presented, this court finds clear intent of collusion between the defendants to unlawfully appropriate corporate assets using fabricated documentation, manipulated authorizations, and concealed financial transfers. No one spoke. It felt like the oxygen had been drained from the room. The defendant, Mrs. Eleanor Reeves, is hereby stripped of all rights to assets related to Reeves Motors, including company shares, voting privileges, dividends, and retirement funds. Mr. Ethan Lowell's case is to be referred to the Federal Financial Crimes Bureau for further investigation regarding tax evasion, money laundering, and complicity in post-divorce fraud. I didn't turn around, but I heard it. Her breath caught in her throat, and Ethan's chair creaked as if he'd nearly stood up, only to realize there was nowhere left to go. They weren't handcuffed, not yet. But from this moment on, every step they took would no longer be theirs to choose. I looked at Vincent. He gave a single nod. Firm, quiet, final. We stood, and I heard the sound of my own shoes striking the floor, each step sharp, echoing like the sound of broken illusions hitting marble. I passed them. Ethan looked down, and she, for the first time since the trial began, looked up at me. Her eyes once held the calm I called home. Now they were hollow, sunken, gray, as if she were staring out from a locked room of her own making. I stopped for a moment. No words, just a glance that asked a question I would never voice. Was there a single moment you regretted it? But I didn't wait for an answer. I turned, pushed open the courtroom door. Outside, the sun was bright. The wind carried a chill. I stood on the courthouse steps and inhaled deeply, and for the first time in months, my heart didn't race. I wasn't carrying a victory. I didn't need a crowd. I didn't need revenge. I walked away with something far more powerful. I survived. And the truth finally had a name. 3 months after the trial, I left the old house. Not because I had to, not because the memories were unbearable, but because I no longer wanted to wake up and see the kitchen where she used to stand, making coffee with her left hand, grumbling about the leaking air conditioner. I didn't want to walk down the hallway and hear echoes of heels clicking, the door lock turning, or worse, the silence between two people who had stopped being anything to each other. I moved into a small house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't large, it wasn't impressive, but it had sunlight. Every morning I opened the windows to a field that stretched into the horizon, trees whispering in the breeze. No traffic, no alerts, no assistant knocking, no past calling. I lived alone, and for the first time that didn't mean loneliness. I planted trees, fixed pipes, brewed my own coffee. Every small task felt like reclaiming a piece of the life I had lost while trying to preserve a marriage. Vincent visited once. He stood on the wooden steps, watching the house, watching me, in a cap holding a weed trimmer, arms smudged with soil. "So," he said, half smiling, "early retirement." I shook my head. "No, I'm just now becoming the CEO of my own life." He handed me an envelope. Inside was the final court confirmation. Every asset, every share, every legal right. Returned, restored, locked down. No one could touch them now. I slid it into a drawer. Next to it an old photo, me and her, back when we sold used cars in a street market. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't look at it either. We were once something, but not anymore. I didn't follow the news, didn't check if she was prosecuted, didn't care where Ethan ended up. I had left their world, and they had no place in mine. Now my days pass slowly. Mornings are for running, afternoons for reading, evenings for cooking simple meals, fried eggs, toasted bread, lentil soup. For the first time in years, I ate without rush, without someone complaining, without trying to fill the silence with forced conversation. I adopted a dog, big, black, gentle, named him Diesel after the first car I ever sold. I learned to take care of myself, not to survive, but to actually live, deliberately. I stopped counting time like I used to, not how many years married, not what percentage of shares, not how many meetings this week. I only counted mornings I woke up without a weight on my chest. Afternoons I could sit in the quiet and not feel abandoned. Evenings I looked in the mirror and saw me. No more masks, no more waiting to be someone else's half. Just me, after everything. I had loved, I had trusted, I had lost, I had been broken in silence. And then step by step I came back, not the same, but as a version of myself that was stronger and at peace. I didn't win, I endured, I outlived it, and that was enough.